Apple is one of the biggest and most interesting companies in the world right now, not for any new products, but for what's going on behind the scenes, because it is now the scenes.
Apple might be about to change more in the next few years than it has in the last decade. And according to MKBHD, the signs are already there. Now, when people think about Apple, they usually think about products. The iPhone, the MacBook, the Apple Watch, maybe even the Vision Pro if you're feeling generous. But what most people don't think about is leadership. Because for the last 14 years, Apple has essentially been the Tim Cook company. And whether you love Apple or hate Apple, it's hard to argue with the results. When Cook took over after Steve Jobs, a lot of people thought Apple had peaked. Some even predicted the company would slowly lose relevance without its legendary founder. Instead, the exact opposite happened. Apple became the most valuable company on the planet. The iPhone turned into one of the most successful products ever created. And Apple's ecosystem became so powerful that millions of people practically live inside it. But here's the thing. Being a great CEO doesn't automatically mean you'll be the CEO forever. And according to reports discussed by MKBHD, Apple may already be preparing for the next chapter. The name that's getting the most attention is John Ternus. Now, unless you're a hardcore Apple fan, there's a good chance you've never heard of him. He's not one of those celebrity CEOs, he's not constantly on social media, and he's definitely not the type of executive doing podcast tours every week. But inside Apple, John Ternus is a big deal. He's currently Apple's Senior Vice President of Hardware Engineering, and he's been heavily involved in many of Apple's major hardware products over the years. What's interesting is that people inside the industry often describe him very differently from Tim Cook. Tim Cook is known as an operations mastermind. Supply chains, manufacturing, logistics, business execution. That's his specialty. John Ternus, on the other hand, is viewed more as a product guy, a hardware guy, someone who thinks first about what Apple should build next, and that difference could have massive consequences. Because if Apple eventually transitions from an operations-focused leader to a product-focused leader, the company's priorities could start to shift. And honestly, there are signs that Apple might need that shift. One of the most interesting points MKBHD made in his video was a comparison between Apple and companies like Google and Samsung. He described Google almost like a creator that uploads every day. They're constantly launching things, new features, new services, new experiments. Sometimes those ideas fail. Actually, a lot of them fail. Google has an entire graveyard dedicated to products that didn't survive. But Google keeps moving. They keep testing. They keep experimenting. Apple has traditionally taken the opposite approach. Instead of launching 10 ideas and seeing which one sticks, Apple often waits until they believe something is ready. That's why Apple usually enters markets later than everyone else. They weren't first with smartphones. They weren't first with smartwatches. They weren't first with wireless earbuds. And they definitely weren't first with AI. The philosophy has always been simple. Don't be first. Be better. For a long time, that strategy worked incredibly well. The problem is that technology is moving faster than ever. Artificial intelligence is evolving at a ridiculous pace. Consumer expectations change almost overnight, and competitors are willing to take bigger risks. Suddenly, Apple's slow and steady approach doesn't always look like confidence. Sometimes it looks like hesitation. And that's where things get really interesting. Because if Apple is entering a new leadership era, the biggest question becomes this: what kind of Apple comes next? And one possible answer is already staring us in the face: the foldable iPhone. For years, foldable phones have existed on the Android side. Companies have spent years refining the technology. Some people love them. Some people think they're gimmicks. Some people think they're the future. Others think they're a solution looking for a problem, and that I think I agree with. But regardless of where you stand, foldable phones represent something Apple hasn't done much of recently. They're risky. They're different. They're exciting. And according to reports mentioned by MKBHD, John Ternus has been closely involved in Apple's foldable efforts. Now, if Apple eventually releases a foldable iPhone, it won't just be another product launch. It could become the symbol of an entirely different Apple. An Apple that's more willing to experiment, an Apple that's more willing to take chances, an Apple that isn't satisfied with simply refining the same formula every year. And I think that's why this story matters. Because this isn't really a story about Tim Cook retiring, it's not even really a story about John Ternus, it's a story about identity. For years, Apple has been one of the most predictable companies in technology. Predictable isn't necessarily bad. Predictable companies make money. Investors love predictability. But consumers usually get excited by surprises. And lately, a lot of people have started asking whether Apple still feels exciting. Think about the conversations happening around the company right now. People debate Apple's AI strategy. People debate Vision Pro. People debate whether iPhone upgrades still feel meaningful. For the first time in a long time, Apple feels like a company standing at a crossroads. One path is staying exactly the way it is. Slow, careful, methodical. The other path is embracing more experimentation and more ambitious products. And if leadership changes happen over the next few years, that decision could shape Apple's future for the next decade. Which is exactly why MKBHD's video caught my attention. Because beneath all the rumors and speculation, there's a much bigger question hiding underneath. What happens when the company that defined modern technology decides it's time to reinvent itself? And honestly, I think we're about to find out. But what do you think? Would you want Apple to become more experimental? Or do you think the company should stick to the formula that made it one of the most successful businesses in history? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more tech commentary and reactions. The Real Bite. See you in the next one.